Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. And it's always a pleasure and a privilege for us to get together and go over these things that are going on around our world. Always a pleasure to see you here with us here on the chat. Thank you to every one of you who join us tonight for these updates. And I tell you, they are getting difficult to go through. There's these headlines. If there's ever been a time that our little theme about being informed without being overwhelmed, if that's ever been true, boy, it's true now as we see the day approaching and more things are happening. And I got to tell you, folks, it is all distraction from your individual purpose and your individual calling. And so just remember that, because regardless of what's going on around the world, you will give account for what you must get accomplished in this last days. And, he has to be able to say, well done. So you've got to get something done. So let me encourage you to keep moving. Yes, we occasionally have to pop up our head and say, what's going on? Well, where are we at? let's take a trip on the 10,000-foot view, right? And get into the news in that regard. And speaking of which, for those of you again joining us, thank you for those of you that are sharing the link and encouraging others to join us for these updates. We really appreciate that. And of course, we do have remnantwatch.com, and we are on watch. We are sober and vigilant, right, brothers and sisters? Sober and vigilant. And just a reminder that this banner at the top will always bring you to the latest weekly news update. And of course, we have these headlines that we keep an eye on, and you're welcome to do a search on our previous headlines to keep up with the things that are going on. And I got to tell you, folks, many of the things that we talk about, it seems almost as if we are just ahead, maybe sometimes a little further ahead, and other times, just ahead of what is coming. And so it is very important that we do these updates, that we do these reviews together and keep an eye together, because when we talk and we discuss some of these things, we're all kind of on the same page. Maybe not all the details, but we at least are familiar with some of the things that are going on. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story, the one that we're watching the closest, of course, is Americans are bracing for violence after Election Day. And so there's a lot of attention now, of course, on the United States of America as it is moving into its election season, and Americans are bracing for violence in an era where political rhetoric has intensified. And boy, oh boy, has it ever. Both sides of the aisle are expressing heightened fears about the stability of American democracy, or republic, as it should say. Scripps News Ipsos poll reveals that over 60% of Americans believe violence on or after Election Day, November 5th, is somewhat or very likely, with 70% of Democrats and 59% of Republicans expecting unrest, and particularly high concerns among battleground states voters like Wisconsin. The specter of post-election violence looms large. And I do think that there is a valid concern. I think that is a reasonable concern for the upcoming, not only the election, but all of the various um, uh, plots and plans and things that are going on at the same time. As we're about to see, there's there's a number of different um, uh, things going on at the same time. And I want to remind everybody that it is, after all, Election Day is falling on the 5th of November. And how many know? I know my history class will know this. Remember, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. So, that was quite a fortuitous day in history. Of course, those of you that know your history know that November 5th is a big day, especially for revolutions and revolutionaries. So I think that the heightened concern for security is somewhat warranted. All right. So that is something to be concerned about. And the Hill is reporting that security fencing is going up around the White House, the Capitol, and the VP residence. New security fencing went up around the White House, U.S. Capitol, and Vice President Harris's residence in Washington, D.C., as authorities prepare for Election Day. In the event there may be political unrest in the coming days, the Secret Service constructed 8-foot metal fences around the White House and Treasury Department complex and the adjacent part of Lafayette Square. Why'd they have to include the Treasury Department? Don't you find that interesting? Oh, we're going to get into that. The Naval Observatory and Harris's house, the Washington Post reported. At the Capitol, previously used temporary bicycle rack barriers stating police do not cross surround the perimeter. And so they are definitely preparing for a little bit of difficulty with regard to this election, this selection, this theatrical performance that we're all watching. Aren't you? Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Okay, well, if you're not entertained yet, don't worry. It's going to get better. And the U.S. Capitol complex, right, is evacuating. They're doing a drill today. Get this, guys. Yeah, you guys are getting it. That's right. Somebody passed the popcorn. U.S. Capitol complex evacuation drill planned for Monday. And of course, they're doing all these different things. And see, folks, they love the drama. They love messing with us. They love putting us in these situations where we don't know what's going on. And here we are again. Now there is a lot of concern about these various groups on either extreme, right? So of course there's always these extremes or zealots on either side of these things. Folks, there's no political solution for what's facing the nations. This is a repentance issue. Just like that's like policemen showing up because the salt shaker is moving, and the cabinet doors are opening and closing. I watched a video; it was ridiculous. As these police officers are going through a house trying to deal with a poltergeist, with a demon, and looking utterly powerless. And that's exactly the same as applying a political solution to a spiritual problem. The nation cannot be healed by an election. Nevertheless, we're going to certainly see some of the harm that's been in the nation, and we're certainly going to be triggering some things. Look at this: ballot box fires across the U.S. sparking an alarm for domestic terrorism. And I think there's some that are expecting to lose. There's a massive pushback effort. A lot of the strategy of one particular side was to vote early, and then that was countered by the other side. And so now we've got all kinds of stuff. Elected officials and commentators are labeling Monday's ballot box arsons in Washington and Oregon as acts of domestic terrorism, as they should be. Washington Secretary of State Steve Hobbs denounced the attacks as acts of terror aimed at destabilizing the democratic process. Again, Republican process. The fires erupted early Monday morning, one in a ballot box in Portland, Oregon, where a fire suppression system protected most of the ballots, and another in Vancouver, Washington, where hundreds of ballots were destroyed after a similar device was used, but the suppression system failed. And so it is going to get dicey. I think we're going to probably see more of that And I do expect to see some type of conflict erupt. However, I do think some of that might be overblown. They might be doing some wishful thinking. After all, it plays into their favor for there to be violence and difficulty, because that's what they're after. Remember, guys, they're after chaos. That's part of their plan, right? So since we know they don't care how they get the chaos, they don't care who the bad guy is, who the good guy is, so long as somebody's throwing something, like an instigator in a bar. They don't care who they get going. They just want to get some bottles flying and chairs flying. That's all they care about, right? That's what you're seeing right here. And again, if you're just demons of mischief, then all you care about is fights. You don't care who fights. And look at this stuff. They're egging it all on, trying to get as many people really on edge, really agitated. MSNBC shockingly edits images from a Nazi rally in coverage of Trump's um, MSG appearance, right? So he appears at Madison Square Garden in New York. And of course, this is a very, very big deal. And they turned it into as if it were a Nazi event. And of course, MSNBC showed images of the Nazi rally at the garden, complete with goose stepping and Hitler salutes. So they really, really went overboard to paint this as if it were a Nazi rally. And I think that that's a very wicked depiction, especially when we've already gone to, as a nation and as a world, have already fought a war there. So that goes to show you that they are absolutely pulling out all the stops and doing everything they can to put trepidation, right, guys? Remember, they always want to put us in a state of fear and a state of anxiety. And as you're starting to learn, this is where their power comes from. And so the more fearless you become, the more perfect you become in love, the calmer you are, the more you see right through all the machinations. You're looking at them like a bunch of 6-year-olds who are telling you lies. And you're standing there going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Come on now. Any of you parents have a 6, 7-year-old that tells whoppers, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Right. And that's exactly what we're all giving them the look like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, really? Is that what happened? Oh, okay. All right. And so we are paying attention to these headlines because they are narrative forming, right, guys? They form narrative. Whether they're true or not, it's not important. What's important is this is what they're telling everybody. And that's what matters. That's why we pay attention to these things, not for the political value, because there's no political value in any of these things. U.S. intelligence fears insider attack on the election is likely. Well, we've already seen that. We've already seen ballot boxes burnt. That's an attack. Intelligence Bulletin says insider threats could derail the election. Wishful thinking. I think that there's those that would love to have done that, and I don't believe they're going to be able to pull that off. Follow all the latest political developments. The ultimate poll reveals the state of race between Trump and Harris, and if this were actually being shown accurately, it wouldn't even be close. And so they're making it a horse race because they have to. That's part of the theater. Who wants to go watch a game where one team's going to blow out the other? Who wants to watch that? Nobody. That doesn't make great TV. That doesn't make good television. They don't want that. They want everybody tuning in, right? So they've got to keep making this seem like it's a tight nail biter. I'm sorry. But if this turns into a nail biter, that's because some things went wrong. And as a matter of fact, Washington is activating its National Guard ahead of Election Day. So they're definitely taking it very seriously, folks. There's no question about it. Washington Governor Jay Inslee announced Friday he had activated the Washington National Guard to assist local law enforcement and Washington State Patrol as needed to quell any election-related unrest. So they are definitely planning for it, especially in certain states, if you know what I mean. And I don't think that's inappropriate. I think there should be a plan for that. National Guard troops and things like that. I think that's an appropriate use of them to keep calm, keep peace, keep order, keep things from becoming violent. This should have been done on several other occasions that I can think of where things got out of hand, i.e., Minneapolis and others, where there was, severe damage done to cities. So ahead of a potential civil unrest due to Tuesday's presidential election, the National Guard is on standby as a precaution in several states, including Washington State and Oregon, where hundreds of ballots were damaged or destroyed after at least 3 ballot drop boxes were recently set on fire, officials say. Almost all of the ballots set ablaze on Monday were in a drop box in Vancouver, Washington, while most ballots in a drop box in Portland, Oregon survived a fire set the same day, election officials said. The incidents are believed to be connected to a third fire on October 8th, also in Vancouver, and Portland police released a physical description of a suspect but said they've not identified him. And so, of course, they're trying to find these operatives, and there aren't that many. Remember the case of what was it? El Salvador we were looking at. And they locked up a percentage of the population, turned out to be a very small overall percentage, a large number. It was 60,000 people, but it was percentage wise a very small percentage of the population. And their crime rate plummeted to the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. So they went from the most dangerous place to the lowest crime rate in the Western Hemisphere. What does that tell you, folks? A lot of times it's a very small number that are instigating these things, but because they're so radical, the responses are radical, and everybody has to deal with those radical things. And isn't that exactly how this whole story started? Didn't a radical bunch of angels decide they wanted to do their own thing? But I digress. Now, as we progress in some of these headlines, let me not forget to mention, and I want to throw this in there because this is contributing to the atmosphere of the international community. And so, something that we've been paying attention to for now a couple of years, watch this slow train wreck coming for the US dollar. And now we're really seeing the rolling out of solutions that are, in effect, bringing about the collapse of the one world currency that's been running the world for a long time now, over 50 years. De-dollarization, 20 countries are ready to ditch the US dollar. This just came out. And so several nations have been focusing on de-dollarization or reducing the US dollar's dominance. We knew that. That's not news to us. But over the past couple of years, the BRICS and Asians and others in particular have doubled down on efforts to disrupt the dollar. So now we're going to see that become more militarized. So de-dollarization means that fewer dollars are used in international commerce and financial activities. This decreases the dollar's value. So this will affect us at the grocery store, along with a number of other places. But the key place that's going to affect people is in their day-to-day necessities, because we in the West have become an import-dependent society with just-in-time inventory. And that system is now starting to break down, folks. So now they were able to avert that strike. They kicked the can down the road till after the new year. But that doesn't mean that that problem is completely solved. And we still have other issues that still have to be resolved. There's infrastructure issues that are coming that are very serious. And even Elon Musk, who is a Trump supporter. So this is, again, just an indicator and something for us to pay attention to. I don't know how we missed this report a week ago, but this came out. Elon Musk predicts hardship and economic turmoil and a stock market crash if Trump wins. And I think it's a bit of a retaliation. That is something that there are those financing the other side of this political aisle that are going to be very bent on trying to make him look bad. And I think the economy is one of those places. So I don't think it makes a difference what happens here, folks. We're going to be looking at some difficult days. The word bombshell has been so grossly overused for so long, it's a guarantee to make everyone's eyes roll. But whether word fits within just a week, and they're talking about the Donald Trump, coming in, and if he comes in, then billionaires are going to be dumping stuff. And as a matter of fact, we have watched a considerable amount of stock movement, stock selling that has in fact occurred. Uh, um, Berkshire Hathaway and those major market leaders seem to be dumping a lot of their stock and holding instead cash. Now, I think they're going to find that that's a bad position as well, as well as the gold and silver people. But nevertheless, they can eat that if they want to. That and their GMO food ought to take them right through the apocalypse, right? I'm sure that's the plan. But nevertheless, these things are falling apart. And folks, this is what was prophesied to come. The book of Revelation reveals that this horror will not endure. And so the Federal Reserve is set to cut rates again while facing a hazy post-election outlook. So they don't know quite what they're doing. This is a way of saying we're flying in the dark. And they're coming into what I call the dark side of the year, too. So it is going to be a dicey time. No one knows how Tuesday's presidential election will turn out, but the Federal Reserve's move 2 days later is much easier to predict. With inflation continuing to cool, the Fed is set to cut interest rates for a second time this year. And so they're hoping to salvage their central bank business and figure out ways to keep that business running while more and more and more people are figuring out alternatives. So that's a sinking ship. It's a Titanic that's taking on water. And while it hasn't sank yet, when it finally capsizes, when it finally gets enough water, it's going to go wonk and wonk. Just it's going to be quick. So it's a little bit and then all at once. And where are we going to see these indicators that where the rubber meets the road, right? This is what we really look at, because these other things can be manipulated with headlines and with, other propaganda, right? But where the rubber meets the road is something that I shared just a few days ago with our brethren. I said, the restaurants, you're going to feel it. Where the rubber meets the road, the malls, the stores, down where people live. And sure enough, here we just saw this headline, just came out this week. Wendy's, which is, again, just a reflection of the American consumer and reflection of what's going on, even on the fast food end, right? Wendy's to close 140 more restaurants by the end of the year to offset openings in new locations. And they're trying desperately to try to make this look like it's no big deal. But it's so easy to just delay a new opening, but still close the other one. So this is all political theater, but it is really serious. And so Wendy's president and CEO Kirk Tanner said the restaurants that are closing are underperforming. Okay. That's a nice way of saying we're going broke, folks. People aren't eating out as much. Trends are changing. Patterns are changing. And folks are starting to figure out the deceptions. I think social media is becoming their undoing. I think more and more people are sharing their negative experiences, and folks are losing their trust with, giving, the trust of food and feeding your child and feeding yourself to companies that we're finding out don't really care as much as we certainly would like them to about our health. And so I'm sorry some of you are going to lose some of your favorites, but maybe buy an ice cream machine. That might be a good thing. Make your own mix. Get back to the basics. What we find out, guys, what we find out is that a lot of these things, when we go to do them ourselves, we're back down to 4 and 5 and 6 ingredients, right? Well, how come we look on the packages and they got 84 ingredients? Okay, we're waking up. We're waking up. So this is a good thing, though. I think we're going to get better quality out of it. So unfortunately, if they're waiting for us to come back, we eat Chase burgers here. So we're not coming back to Wendy's. That ain't happening. Sorry. But, then again, I think a lot of people are slowly disconnecting. I think it's a sign that people are waking up. They're getting it. Okay, they're getting it. On a more serious note, we are seeing some very serious saber rattling that is going on now between Russia and the rest of the world, of course, and that is a foreboding sign because, of course, these are major powers, and Russia drills simulated a massive nuclear strike because, again, the United States took the gloves off of Ukraine's use of long-range missiles. So Russia is now telling them that if you guys do this, we ain't playing. Okay. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday launched a massive exercise of the country's nuclear forces featuring missile launchers in the simulation of a retaliatory strike as he continued to flex the country's nuclear muscle amid spiraling tensions with the West over Ukraine, which I am really hoping is going to end here real soon because this thing has been absolutely just horrible. But nevertheless, he has repeatedly brandished the nuclear sword as he seeks to deter the West. But there's going to come a point, when you keep talking about it enough times, sooner or later you're going to push the button. And that's, of course, what we're all concerned about, is that they will, in fact, do that. And if they do, the devastation will be, life-altering for everyone on Earth, because there is no winning that war, guys. The amount of devastation that these large weapons can do is incomprehensible in our modern era. And so that's why there's pressure even on Poland now, apparently, to shoot them down, Poland. Poland, you're our only hope. Poland, you're a shield, Poland. I don't know if Poland knew they were going to be given this job because they didn't seem too enthusiastic, but lawmakers to Biden let Poland shoot down Russian missiles. The bipartisan leaders of the U.S. Helsinki Commission want President Biden to greenlight NATO's ally Poland to extend its air defense to Ukraine skies, helping shoot down Russian missiles under the guise of self-defense. And so, again, they're trying to broaden or widen this conflict in any way they can. And you can read more about that. Of course, they're going to take advantage of any Polish lives lost. Of course, November 2022, there were 2 Polish farmers that were killed when an errant Ukrainian missile, fell on Polish territory. So there are certainly attempts to rope in other countries. And it's like they had this party and they just kept inviting people and couldn't quite get the countries to participate the way they want to. So, they planned a long time for this thing, and they don't seem to be getting quite the response that they planned on, that they thought they would get, right? And so, like I said before, we've got to watch how all of these things unfold. And I don't know if you guys were familiar with Janet Yellen, U.S. Treasury Secretary, and she was asked about, the U.S. dollar in relation to this whole BRICS pressure and everything going on. Take a look at this.
Time horizon, how concerned are you about the potential impact of the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency?
And the emblem, I'm going to rewind that. So
how concerned are you about the potential impact of the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency?
About the dollar impact, or the BRICS impact on the dollar. The emblem for the central bank just collapses right there. I mean, just kind of perfect timing for that question. And so there's a lot of wild on that one. Boy, that's I do believe that is indicative of the way in which it will fall. And unfortunately, that's something that we are going to have to endure. So folks, buckle up. You're going to see some things that you probably would rather not. Okay. So that's a reality. That's something you're going to have to understand is I know a lot of folks were told you're not going to be here for that. And unfortunately you are. Ukraine's Zelensky is urging allies to act before North Korean troops reach the front. How many know that they're game changers? The North Koreans aren't going to play the same as the Russians who've been fighting with their cousins, the Ukrainians, right? So Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky urges allies to stop watching and take steps before North Korean troops deployed in Russia reach the battlefield. And the country's army chief warned that his troops are facing one of the most powerful offensive by Moscow since the all-out war started more than 2 years ago. And I do believe that this is a game changer. I do believe this signals them attempting, at least at their attempt, to finish off this conflict quickly. Zelensky raised the prospect of a preemptive Ukrainian strike on camps where the North Korean troops are being trained and said Kiev knows their location. But he said Ukraine can't do it without permission from allies to use Western made long range weapons to hit targets deep inside Russia. And of course, you know that as soon as you were to do something like that, you would in fact have world war. So there are countries that, are cooler heads are prevailing and people are thinking long and hard before they pull such a trigger. Because it was one thing when you were sitting there beating your chest in some underground dungeon meeting that you were having with all your funny guys in their funny hats on. It's a whole nother thing when it's going live. Okay. It's going live. And so you can get them in uniforms, but can you make them fight? When you got your grand plan, does it always work out? Not always. Ukraine admits a number of deserters. Their soldiers from the armed forces of Ukraine surpass 100,000. My numbers that I got was 170,000 deserters. As people that they put out there, thought they were going to fight for them, and they ended up quitting when they went out into the battlefield. Earlier, military lawyer from the Center for the Support of Veterans and Their Families, Roman Lukachev, said that more than 100,000 servicemen had voluntarily left their units. Okay. So desertion and unauthorized abandonment of the unit in the ranks of the armed forces of Ukraine surpasses 100,000. So that's not a good sign. That is them who are in the fight saying, me no want to fight no more. Me no likey. Me no likey de fighty. Okay. Meanwhile, the North Koreans aren't going anywhere. This just came out on Reuters. North Korea will back Russia until victory in Ukraine, foreign minister says. So if morale was already, rough, and now they're going to bring in a whole new, fresh army to do battle with you, yeah, that'll make an army quit. So North Korea will back Russia until it achieves victory in the Ukraine war. Foreign Minister Klo Son-hui said on Friday at talks in Moscow with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Our traditional, historically friendly relations, which have traveled the tested path of history today, are rising to a new level of relations of invincible military comradeship. Did you hear that? Invincible. They believe they're invincible. Whether they are or not doesn't matter. They believe they are. And if they believe they are, they will act accordingly. So that is a dangerous and foreboding thing to say. Okay, yep, here come new bullies on the block. Exactly. And as a matter of fact, the EU is warning its people. So this is a foreboding sign because the EU is telling citizens to stock up for nuclear disaster. Households should also be prepared for cyber attacks and the use of chemical weapons. So they're expecting an all-out war. You EU citizens should start stockpiling 3 days worth of goods in order to be ready for various potential disasters. Yeah, because if a nuke drops, all you need is like 2 or 3 days. You're good. You're good. So they're telling you about it, but then giving you misinformation on how to resolve it. This is utterly ridiculous advice, by the way. But okay, yeah, sure. Just have a couple days worth of stuff. And then when you run out, I'm sure your neighbors will be just super helpful, right? The document also calls for the EU to boost its defense and spend around 20% of its common budget, currently worth about 1 trillion over 7 years, on security and crisis preparedness. I seem to recall a previous president over there in Europe telling them they're going to pay their bill. Now they're going to pay it one way or the other. You're either going to pay it in, paying a part of your mutual defense, or you're going to have to build up your own defense. Either way, you're going to pay. This whole freebie thing that wasn't going to last any longer. And that's true, and that also creates hegemony and it creates bullies. So I'm glad to see that these things are finally falling apart. Remember, folks, where we're on our way to. That's important for us to keep our eye on. We're on our way to a time when, according to the prophecy in the book of Isaiah, that we will beat our swords into plowshares. We will have had enough of warfare. How many are feeling like, Yeah, we're definitely probably coming up on that point, right? As a matter of fact, there are efforts right now to try to mitigate these things. So, a Russian plane, for example, landed in Israel. Many of you did not know this. I know this was not reported broadly, but it did occur. Israeli officials refused to comment on an aircraft from Moscow, which landed in the country. As reports suggest, the Kremlin is negotiating with the release of Israeli Russian hostages in Gaza. And there's an attempt to try to keep them from escalating this. But a Russian aircraft landed on Israel on Thursday afternoon and later headed back to Moscow for reasons that are currently not clear. This is a week and a half. It was a week ago, a little while, but nevertheless important because there are efforts to try and bring in um, change and bring in peace. So it's not as if there aren't efforts. It's just that there are those who are bent. I mean, bent on war. Okay. And they're really trying hard to get this thing going where it's not, you notice there's a delay between reactions. So it's like these guys shoot something and there's like 3 weeks go by. Then now you know why World War III or World War II rather lasted 5 years. This kind of stuff. So now we're seeing Iran's supreme leader threatens Israel and the US. So now both the US and Israel are on the chopping block with a crushing response over Israeli attack. United Arab Emirates, Iran's supreme leader on Saturday threatened Israel and the U.S. with a crushing response over attacks on Iran and its allies. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei spoke as Iranian officials are increasingly threatening to launch yet another strike against Israel after its October 26 attack on the Islamic Republic that targeted, of course, military bases and other locations and killed at least 5 people. Could have been a lot worse. And I do believe that what Iran did the last time it hit Israel will be a little bit stronger response. I would expect that you're going to see more damage, more visible damage, harder to hide damage that we're going to start seeing now. And again, the international community is reacting to all of this, and it is not a positive reaction if you're in Israel. So the Biden administration is issuing an ultimatum. It's threatened to cut off military aid to Israel 1 week after the election because of the treatment of Gaza. And so the Biden administration issued an ultimatum to Israel that if the humanitarian situation in Gaza doesn't improve by November 13th, it will cut off military aid. Well, again, this is a lot of this is just blubbery and nonsense, but because you shouldn't even give them any time. But the warning follows a letter by the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to their Israeli counterparts on October 13th. The letter stated that if there were no amelioration of the condition of Gazan civilians in 30 days, it would be a likely limitation on the delivery of weapons. And so Israel's going to have to go it a little bit alone there. Do you think they care? I don't think they care. And I don't, so far, nothing has seemed to deter them. No one has seemed to be able to talk them off this warpath that they seem determined to be on. And so if you're wondering how all the nations of the world end up in Armageddon, which is in a valley in the middle of Israel, if you're wondering how that happens, I think you're starting to figure out how it is that all the armies end up there. You're starting to see the picture of how it ends up coming to pass. Okay. And here we're seeing the alliance between China and Iran is intensifying. And many are expecting greater Christian persecution because, of course, China is known for that and Iran is known for that. And so it is reasonable to expect that coalition will be very much an anti-Christian coalition. China's recent pledge of unwavering support for Iran could intensify the persecution of Christians in both countries, warns the U.S.-based group International Christian Concern. The concern arises after Chinese President Xi Jinping affirmed strong ties with Iran during the annual BRICS summit. According to Chinese news outlet Xinhua, President Xi stated at the summit No matter how the international and regional situation changes, China will unswervingly develop friendly cooperation with Iran. And so he's making his intentions clear, and they are building bridges with Iran and through India. And so there are a lot of um, changes in the international stage, if you will. And now you're seeing something that was talked about only in hushed tones and behind closed doors. But Iranian officials are now pushing to publicly pursue a nuke following Israelis' counterstrike. In response to the aggressor Zionist regime, the defense and nuclear doctrine of our country should be revised, said Mohammad Reza Sabakian. Iranian officials are seeking to openly pursue nuclear weapons following Israel's weekend attack on a host of military installations, publicly acknowledging work that Tehran has long tried to hide from the international community. So much for them not pursuing nuclear weapons. Now, remember, if they already have hypersonic, they have the delivery vehicle. So they have a delivery vehicle that can move in such a speed that they can't be stopped. And if you can equip it with a nuclear head, Houston, we've got ourselves a problem. And it isn't just Israel that's got itself a problem. Okay. And so this is getting very, very serious, folks. Iran's guard chief warns of bitter, unimaginable consequences for Israel's strike. Tehran says it will use all available tools to respond to targeted assault on military sites. Iraq lodges its complaint at the UN over alleged use of its airspace during the Israeli op. The head of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said Monday that Israel had, quote, failed to achieve its ominous goals, end quote, with its Saturday strikes on Iranian military sites. Hossein Salami, quoted by the Tasnim news agency, said the Israeli attack, which came in retaliation for Iran's October 1st ballistic missile barrage on the country, was a sign of miscalculation and helplessness as Israel battles the Iran-backed Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. And I got to tell you, there are a lot of analysts that don't buy Israeli supremacy. Israel was not really built, their military was not really built for long campaigns. And the trauma of the Gaza campaign, the human toll of that on both sides, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, is horrific. And now they're being expected to go into Lebanon with the same intensity, and that is backfiring. And so I think you're going to see some major changes happening there in the not too distant future. But nevertheless, the region is now ignited. And the U.S. is, of course, warning Iran. So the war of words is getting up. And what do we all know about these war of words, right? So the U.S. is warning Iran that we won't be able to restrain Israel if you attack. The Biden administration warned Iran in recent days against launching another attack on Israel and stressed it won't be able to restrain the Israelis, according to a U.S. official and a former Israeli-based brief on the issue. Okay, so of course they're basically trying to make it sound like, hey guys, we're trying to keep peace here, but so it's let them hit you, but you don't hit them back. This is exactly how we ended up here, folks. So this is this kind of thing is not going to continue for much longer. And I don't know if you guys heard about this, changing gears, coming back to the U.S., but we continue to have chemical fires and other kinds of explosions and things. Were you guys familiar with this? There was a lithium plant. So again, this is a subject that's gotten a lot of attention because after all, you know how we need that lithium. I mean, come on, guys. And a fire erupts in southwest Missouri at one of the world's largest lithium-ion battery facilities. Ooh, not good. Residents of a southeast Missouri town were forced to evacuate their homes Wednesday when a fire erupted at a nearby battery recycler. And you look at this and you think, oh, a little fire. No, let me tell you, this was a inferno. Look at this thing. This was no joke. This place was exploding. These lithium batteries, when they ignite, they are next to impossible to put out. And so this was the scene there in Missouri from an actual eyewitness, of course. And look at the explosions. Look at the air pollution. Where's all that smoke going? That's a lot of cow farts, don't you think? That's a lot of cow farts. So, that's what really happened. So when you look at these stories and you only see the aftermath, you might not really understand how epic this really was. This was quite the fire. And again, we're continuing to see um, more and more of these types of things in the United States, which of course are. Does anyone know what's going to come down in the rain when this smoke comes back down? Anybody? Do you have any idea what's coming back down to earth when that smoke comes back down in the rain? It's called acid rain for a reason, folks. It's pretty bad stuff. And so that wasn't the only really odd event. Did you guys hear about the bridge that caught on fire? The steel bridge that caught on fire. Massive fire damage, steel beams. Yes, steel. I know. I was thinking the same thing. I know what you're thinking. That can't be. But it apparently is because it's right here. I mean, it's on the internet, so it's got to be true. Massive fire damages steel beams, deck on Daniel Carter Bayard Bridge over Ohio River. Oh, and that would be an important bridge, wouldn't it? I would think so. One of the main connections between Cincinnati and northern Kentucky. What's with Cincinnati? It's been in the news a lot. Could be closed for weeks after a fire under the Daniel Carter Bayard Bridge damages steel structure, officials said Friday. Because, that fire and steel, man, they go together like so quick. Wow. The blaze in the Sawyer Point Thousand Hands Playground, which sits under the bridge, was initially reported at 3:20 a.m. Because there you go. There's some serious silliness afoot in our country, let me tell you. I think all of this has got some very suspicious. It's very suspicious indeed. Just you got to kind of wonder, like, where are we? It's a little bit of Twilight Zone-ish, but there we are, folks. And so expect that. Hey, did you hear about? I almost forgot to get to this. Did you hear about Spain? A month's worth of Spain fell in a single day in parts of Spain. Here, let me pull this up here. I'm starting to get some flashbacks. Sometimes these sites, they don't do all the ads right away. They do the ads after you've been there a while, right? So they delay them because they're clever. At least 95 people have been killed. Oh no, we are going to get an update on this, but many are missing after the torrential rain caused serious problems in southern and eastern Spain, local authorities said. And take a look at this, folks. I mean, this was no joke. Spain was in serious inundation, and they had the two boats and the helicopter, and that is as serious as it gets, folks. When they've got to evacuate people like this, that means it got bad quick. Look at those cars piled up. Look at that water movement. This came in and did serious damage. And I saw footage of the King of Spain going down to survey the damage, and they began to pelt him with mud balls, and it was not good. And of course, what do you want to guess? Do you guys think this is normal rainfall? Normal? Every day? Happens all the time? Or do you want to guess that this is, here we go, folks, ready? Unprecedented. 100 years. Once in 100 years. What are the odds? Well, the Prime Minister of Spain came out against the Israeli effort in Gaza. So you can put two and two together if you want to. There's a whole lot of people that are doing just that. And as a matter of fact, the death toll is rising. Spain is searching for bodies. This is hard to watch. Unprecedented flooding claims at least 158 bodies, and that number just continues to rise. So each report, it seems like they're finding more. Crews are searching for bodies in stranded cars and sodden buildings. Thursday, as residents salvaged what they could from their ruined homes following a monstrous flash flood in Spain that claimed at least 158 lives. So those of us in the United States that recently had very similar situations on the East Coast and, of course, other parts can certainly identify with the way these people feel right now. More horrors emerged Thursday from the debris and ubiquitous layers of mud left by the walls of water that produced Spain's deadliest natural disaster in living memory. So unprecedented. We've reached perpetual unprecedented. And basically now they're concerned. The numbers are going to go way up, because they're finding things like this. Fears of mass graves in Valencia. Cars park after flood disaster. Storms batter Mallorca, and 5,000 more troops were deployed. So they're finding large numbers of people in their vehicles that just did not react quickly enough. And this is how quickly things can happen and how fast people can be swept away. And so it's a very horrible thing to watch. And these are the days of grave difficulty that we were warned we would see, that would come in these last hours. And we were given an admonition for this time period, my brothers and sisters. We were told that as we see these days approaching, that we should conduct ourselves a certain way. And so let me admonish you all, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, to get that message, because it is together that he places the barakah. That is where he puts the barakah, not on these commercial enterprises masquerading as the assembly, for these are imposters. And many are finding out just how compromised or contaminated these quote unquote houses of worship actually are. And again, we're not being mean. We're not trying to be mean to anyone. We're not trying to be nasty or negative. It's just reality. It's like a building inspector that goes in and finds a house that has radon gas, right? And then you find out a certain builder made all these houses and they made them with these materials that are all contaminated. Wouldn't you tell everyone? Wouldn't you say, look, we're not trying to, it's not personal against this builder or against this company. It's just that they use materials that are contaminated. Well, they put altars in these buildings that every one of them are an abomination before Yahuwah. Every single one. He has very specific instructions about these things. And in their ignorance, they avoided those. They ignored those things. And they mattered. And they opened the door to spirits. And they opened the door to things that, people took for granted. They didn't realize what they were letting in, folks. They didn't realize what they were opening the door to. And I do believe that many, many people are waking up to the reality that we do live in a very spiritual world. It is, there was a video that we put on our discussion board. We encourage you to go see it, where a pastor, maybe I can find it really quickly here and add it. Here it is right here.
A priest records himself making an announcement.
This guy is trying to invite people to his church. As he's trying to invite people to come to his meeting, it doesn't matter what he's talking about. You're going to notice very quickly here, as the podium decides it's got a life of its own, that he doesn't have command over the spirits in even his own sanctuary, if you could call it that. And so this is a laughable joke. People were set up. They think it's funny. Look at him. He's still laughing. He still thinks it's funny. He's about to see the flag move, and the podium's gonna shake again. Okay, get knocked down. He thinks the whole thing's laughable. Meanwhile, he wants to lay hands on you guys, right? And so this is open and blatant. It's going to become more blatant and more open like that, where you're going to see those spirits straight punking them. Okay, straight punking them because they bought lies and they couldn't be bothered with that which mattered. And here we're seeing even more tragedies now emerging. This story was sent to me. We'll close with this tonight. The FBI is raiding the home of South Carolina pastor John Paul Miller, whose wife died after accusing him of stalking her. And so on Friday, federal officials began conducting an investigation on South Carolina pastor Paul Miller's home because of the death of his wife. Isn't this sad and tragic? Labeled as a court-authorized law enforcement activity, according to an FBI spokesperson. The investigation comes months after Miller's wife was found dead as a result of a, quote, suicide. So the wheels are coming off, and this is what we're seeing. More and more people are experiencing. And one of the things that we caution you all about, we continue to post various video updates in our discussion board about increased poltergeist activity, increased demonic activity. That's what it is. And you're going to find that many people who didn't take it seriously, well, their rebuker won't work. And they are going to be fighting an enemy that their guns are useless. I watched one video where a couple of cops are going in, and they looked powerless. They looked ridiculous. And they are powerless. There are no weapons in the natural against these things. And this is what is manifesting in this hour. And so this is why it's important for us, the remnant, to be awakened, to be consecrated at this time, so that when we are needed, when the fire alarm gets rung and we've got to run to the rescue, we're ready to minister, to be a vessel that he can use, a vessel fit for the master's use. At the time of the crisis, it's not the time to fast and pray. You got to be prepared. At the time of the battles, not the time to prepare. And I recently saw a saying that I think has really impacted me. I think it's a very, very good saying. It's something that we should all meditate on. And the more you sweat in practice, the less you'll bleed in battle. And so let me encourage all of you to get to your practice, get to your duty stations, get to the place that he has ordained for you. Find your fold, find the place that you can be held accountable. If there's no elders or deacons and fivefold there, then it's not an assembly. And his name has to be there. And so again, there's so many things that we're learning now, that we're waking up to realize that we were deceived, and we're finding out, unfortunately, behind enemy lines. So if there's ever a time, an unprecedented time, to assemble with your brothers and sisters, this is that time. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That's tonight's report. I pray that it has been an encouragement to you. Again, thank you for sharing the link and for subscribing if you haven't already. We're so grateful for every one of the members of Remnant House that make these broadcasts possible. Without your faithful support, your love, and your prayers, well, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you so much for being a part of this moment right now in Earth's history. You are making a difference as you shine your light. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you again for joining us. May Elohim grant each and every one of you shalom in your homes, wherever you are. Good night.